So often we can look at the stories of the Bible, the heroes of the faith, and we may appreciate the stories. We may even love them, but how often do we truly imitate them? But today, we're going to take just a brief glimpse into one aspect of the life of an amazing hero of the faith. And one of the attributes that I believe that if you and I will truly not just imitate, but embrace, that it will be a guide, a roadmap, so to speak, for you and I to transform our lives, deepen our relationship with the Lord, and even help fulfill some of those greatest, deepest desires. Welcome to God Powered. Now, we are taking a brief glimpse, a look into the life of an amazing hero of the faith. And there is among the many attributes that made this man a friend of God, there is one that we absolutely need to imitate, to emulate, to develop as our lifestyle. But I will warn you, it's not easy. Because ultimately, we talk about wanting to trust God. We talk about wanting Him to take us to a new level. But ultimately, what we really deep down desire is we want to be comfortable. We don't want to have to give up too much. We don't want to have it to change too much. We want stability. We don't want it to be scary. And we want clarity. We really want God to say, here's exactly how it's going to work, and here's all that I'm going to do for you. Here's the bargain. Isn't that really sometimes what we want? God said, well, if you'll do this, then this is what you're going to get. And what we're going to see with this person is this absolute attribute of trust and response, willing to surrender and trust. And in doing so, what we'll see is they did have a deep, deep desire that God did fulfill, which we'll come to in a minute. But in process, they were transformed. Their relationship with the Lord grew to incredible levels. He, again, became a friend of God. And God was able to work in and through and around him in powerful ways. And it is truly a guide, a roadmap for you and I, if we will embrace it. So this hero of the faith is Abraham, originally known as Abram. And we're going to just look at a few chapters. You should really study this man's life. There is so much for you and I to glean, to truly live that God-powered life. But we're just going to look at just a few chapters today, in a few highlights in how they all built upon each other towards him becoming and doing and achieving all that he did. Now it starts in Genesis 12. And I'm sure you know the story, but just bear with me because there's some pieces of this that I think we really need to stop and get. So Genesis 12, God says to Abram at the time, I want you to leave everything you know. Leave your comfort zone. Leave what you know and go to a place I will show you. One translation says it this way, to a place I will guide you to. And I like that because that's truly our relationship with the Lord. It's Him guiding us step by step, even though and I'm sure you, so often want Him to say, oh, here's what it's going to be. Here's how it's going to look. Here's when you're going to get there. But it wasn't. It was to the place I will guide you to. And He makes an amazing promise. But as we'll see, this promise is nice, but it doesn't truly address Abram's deepest desire. And so God says, I will make your name great. I will bless you. I'll bless those who bless you, and I'll curse those that curse you. So it's a nice, big promise. But as we will see, it really doesn't address what Abraham really wanted. But what's the attribute? And that is Abram's complete willingness repeatedly to surrender all, to just rely on God. And so you know the story. What did Abram do? He immediately left everything to follow God, to walk with Him, to a place that God would show him. But he didn't know what it was yet. Now, a couple of key points. So first, Genesis 12. He leaves. He just says, okay, God, I'm with you. Now, in verse 7, after he's responded, what happens? Then God says, okay, this is the place I'm going to give to your offspring. Okay, so now we're getting a little bit more clarity. God is developing that promise. He's developing the vision that he has for Abram's life. But he didn't have that part until he responded. Now, we're not going to go into it today, but I love the absolute transparency of the Bible. See, early on, while Abram responded, he did not always completely trust God. And we see that right there, because right after this, what happens? There's a famine. And Abram responds by, in his own thinking, in his own strategizing, rather than trusting God, he goes to Egypt, which was a mistake. And we see him do this more than once. But here's the beauty. What does God do? In spite of, and this is for you and I, we need to embrace this and recognize we're going to blow it once in a while. We won't do this perfectly. But in the process, God will, as he did with Abram, what did he do? He watched over him, he protected him, he even blessed him. See, that's part of our relationship with the Lord, is growing and learning. Now, so he's responded, and God has said, okay, this is the land I'm going to give to your offspring. He's getting a little more clarity, and he continues this walk with the Lord. But, God had blessed, and so his nephew Lot is with him, and between the two of them, the land couldn't support them. Now, here is an opportunity where he absolutely demonstrates complete trust in the Lord, because what he says to Lot is, we can't both live here. It's just not enough. So you choose. If you go to the left, I will go to the right. If you go to the right, I go to the left. Now, we need to stop for a moment and recognize, see, Abram as the uncle, as the senior, as the one with the authority. Frankly, it should have worked the other way around, where Abram said, look, I'm going to settle here. You need to go over there. But no, what we see is in his trust of God, and we'll see this more than once, how he had an open hand, that he repeatedly, in these kind of situations, rather than look at what he could gain for himself, demonstrated his trust in God. Now, you know the story. Lot chose this area because it looked great. So Abram said, great, okay, you go there, I'll go here. And after this, then God brought a bit more clarity. See, what we see is right after that, God appears to him. He speaks to him again, and what he says is, this is it. Look to the north, the south, the east, and the west. This, everything you can see, I'm going to give to your offspring. He's developing that vision a little bit deeper. And now he says this, go walk it. In other words, it's moving beyond concept to go walk it. Go see what it is that I have for your offspring. But remember, as we'll see in a moment, there was ultimately a desire of Abram's that's not been mentioned. It's still there, but God has not addressed Abram's deepest desire. Now, finally, the last aspect we're going to look at in today's episode is this. So, what happens? These kings go to war, and Lot is caught up in the middle of it and is taken captive. Now, what happens? Abram, who was an amazing man of God, he has 300 men in his household trained for war. He trained them. Now, you have all these kings, great armies, and Abram goes after them with 300 of his men to rescue his nephew. There's a boldness. Now, we have an episode you can search out, and I believe it's called Abraham's Open Hand. But anyway, the point is this. God gives them the victory. And in the process, he continues to demonstrate his absolute trust in the Lord. Now, two things happen. One is he meets Melchizedek, which I believe is an early appearance of Jesus. And what does he do? He gives him a tenth of all. This is the first time we see someone giving a tithe. But more importantly, we see where his trust is displayed in that what happens? He gains the victory, and the kings who were defeated say, look, Just give us our people back. You can keep all the blessings, all the loot that was captured. And Abram says, I don't want a shoestring so that you can't say that you bless me. See, he's learning to absolutely rely on the Lord. He's no longer working it out in his own ingenuity. Now, what happens? So finally, we're going to wrap up with this, but I just want to point out how that complete surrender, that moving out of comfort zone, out of stability, if we would learn to just completely, now, can we develop a lifestyle where we not just truly say, God, I trust you, but say, okay, Lord, I'm willing to give up my comfort zone. I'm willing to give up my stability, the clarity. I'm willing to live a life of complete reliance on you. And if we do, what will happen? See, as Abram continually demonstrated his reliance on the Lord, then God continually clarified that vision, that promise of what God had for him. And after this, God appears to him again. And this is chapter 15. I absolutely love this because we hear Abram's heart's cry. And what does he do? So God says to him, I am your shield. I am your great reward. And Abram says to God, you've been good to me. Yes, you've been really good to me, Lord, but here's what I really want. What about this? And what's his deepest desire? See, he wanted a child of his own. Yes, he had 300 men in his household, but they were all servants. They were all employees. In fact, in his eyes, God, this is a nice promise that you're going to give this land to us, but I don't have any children. It's going to go to my employees, my servants. And now then, what does God do? God goes deeper. See, he didn't start here in Genesis 12. God did not say to Abram in Genesis 12, look, leave everything you know, and as you demonstrate that you trust me, I'm going to fulfill your deepest desires. I'm going to transform you. No. He gives him a nice promise. It's a big promise. But it didn't touch on what Abram really wanted. And now then, as he has lived a lifestyle of relying on God, demonstrating that he was willing to put it all in God's hands, he now pours out his heart and God responds. And what happens? God changes his name from Abram to Abraham, the father of many nations. And he makes this profound promise to Abraham now, that he's going to give him a son and that he will have offspring like the sand of the seashore. See, now then we're digging into that real deep desire. And what happens? We see that Abram has been transformed. Literally, his name is even changed. As part of that transformation, he has become, and we will see later, he continues to develop as a friend of God. And we see, while it's not fulfilled yet, we see God has specifically now spoken into Abraham's deepest desire and made an amazing commitment that he basically made a contract. God made a contract with himself to fulfill Abraham's deepest desire as he did what? As he learned to just let go, release it to God, completely rely on God in everything. And as he demonstrated that, he was transformed. And he was given a promise which, as you know, will lead to him receiving the greatest blessing and his deepest desire.